how do you do a portrait? How did I do this portrait or this quick sketch? I'm going to show you right now in this video, and you're going to see we're going to pull a couple of ideas from the Loomis head, but not that many. We're going to pull a few ideas from the Reilly rhythms. We're going to pull a few ideas from that method where you simplify the light and dark on the face. We're going to take the best bits of each different method and use them whenever they're going to help us. And one useful rule of thumb is, does it make it easier for me? If it makes it easier for me, I'm going to use it, right? So the initial thing you can see here in faint lines on the right, the initial thing I sort of throw down is a rough ball shape with an axis line. So one right down the middle of the face and one through the top of the ear and the eyebrows, like this. And that's just to make sure I get the head on the right angle, right? So if he was looking more off to the side, then the face, it might be more like this. It might be looking out this way. I just want to get it looking in the right direction, broadly speaking, right? I can then start to do all kinds of different things. So from there, I could start to build the jaw and chin shape. In this case, I've tried to start to place the base of the nose. So where the nose kind of meets the face at the bottom, and a little bit of this eye socket. Okay, so this initial step, it's like a ball of clay. I'm a sculptor. It doesn't matter that much what the initial ball of clay is like, because I'm going to start chopping stuff off, pushing things in, adding clay onto it. So it's not a huge deal, right? If I use a ball or a cylinder or whatever I want to use to start things off. Here I've done a really important step, which is to place the eyeballs. All right, so I'm embedding these eyeballs. I've kind of got a little bit of a sense of the eye sockets, like the indent of the eye sockets, and then I jam the eyeballs in there, into this indent. This is such an important step because very often what happens, let's say people, they're really like, I want to use Loomis, and so they'll start to build, they've just got that one diagram from the Loomis book, they'll put in the ear, right? And then from there, people will often start to just kind of paint features, paint eyes, paint the nose, and paint lips onto that, right? And the face becomes very flat. But what we want to do is start to build the face from the forms in the face, right? So we'll jam those eyeballs right in there and jam them into the sockets, just in this initial simple sketch. Okay, so here I've added two ideas that I love from the Reilly rhythms. One of the most useful ideas from it is this ball shape in the muzzle. So I really love that. And it's, it kind of comes up into the nose, so the nose overlaps it, and the chin has a little ball shape as well, and that overlaps it too. So this is pretty much what I'm trying to capture. And you'll notice I'm not getting into any details here. I'm trying to think about big, simple shapes. So if I was sculpting a face, I wouldn't sort of get a lump of clay and then start trying to put in every eyelash straight away. I'd be trying to get the big, simple ideas as best I can. Once I'm happy with those, then I might start to cut smaller ideas into the big ideas. But I've got to make sure I've got my big ideas solid before I move on. All right. So what you're seeing me do here in my little sketch is let's get rid of all these lines. I've established, quite a lot of ideas. But what's going on in the cheeks? So what do I see in the cheeks? You see that roundness? Like let's say I wrap some lines over these cheek forms. You know how the cheeks come out, to the sides, and they've got this volume to them. Some people have very, very full, round cheeks. Some people have quite sort of sunken cheeks, Different people have different cheek shapes, and I'm trying to see those. I'm not thinking, I am using this method, so I need to stick to that method. I'm trying to see the forms of this face, and then I'm going to use tools from wherever to help me capture those ideas. And in this case, I see this curvature of the cheek here, and I see it over here as well. And it's really useful, especially, well, not just in portraits, but in figures too, but to draw from one side to the other so that they're connected. rather than just kind of going, right, I'm drawing this side, I'm going to draw this. Now later on, I'm going to draw this side and I'm going to draw this. And then they're not connected. It's really cool if you can connect the two. And often this rhythm line is going to go through the mouth. So you see that I put that down in the sketch. The other thing I like to do is I like to find, you know, if we have this kind of bulging form here, I like to find the top of that. So I like to bring it from here across to the upper ear. So this one went along the bottom of that form, and then I'm trying to find the top of it here. And this isn't really, I don't think, how the Reilly rhythms work, but this is how I see it. And it really makes a lot of sense to me. I'm trying to capture this cheek form, which I can see, and that gets the bottom and the top of it. And I'll often bring down this rhythm line too, which kind of helps me get that, where does the front plane of the face turn to become the side plane of the face? And so these ideas are helping me to sculpt out the cheeks. And in addition to this, we have a form here. Because he's an older gentleman, this form often comes out. It doesn't always come out on everybody, but in this case it does. And so I'm going to add this rhythm line that goes all the way around like this, because it helps to capture that. You can see that kind of bulging form here, and it helps me to capture that. All right, so from here, I'm going to start to build the shapes of value. So obviously he's lit by the sun quite directly, and I'm seeing this, and then I'm seeing this as where the shadow and the light are separated. So if I'm not sure, I can kind of squint at it. I don't want to do this. Let me show you what I don't want to do. I don't want to start doing this. Going around and round and around and around, all these little things. I don't want to do that. I want to cut through with big, simple lines. Bing, cut through, make it as simple as I possibly can. Because later I can cut smaller shapes into it, but I want to get the big, simple shapes. I'm starting to establish some of the features. So I will sort of get this bottom plane of the nose, and then maybe try and get the actual shape of the nose like this. And it's similar with the lips. I don't actually have to do that as distinctly as I am, but I do find that that can be helpful to start placing those things. One thing that I'm doing along the way, by the way, is I'm not as concerned about getting a perfect likeness to this man. I'm just trying to create an interesting portrait painting, and it doesn't need to have a perfect likeness. Sometimes I do want to get a likeness, and when I do that, I'll take more time with placements and measurements and stuff like that. But since that's not really what this painting is about, I'm letting go of that, and I'm not worrying about it as much. Okay, so because I placed the eyeballs, it's much easier then to create the eye by wrapping the lids over this ball shape. Very hard, I find, to draw eyes unless I've placed the ball shape first. But unfortunately, when I look at this, one thing that I do is, what I actually have is I have a webcam recording this as I draw, and I've got it flipped horizontally. If I didn't have that, I would take a photo of the sketch and flip it horizontally on my phone. But as it is on my computer, I can see what I'm drawing flipped horizontally. I look up, I go, the eyes are just not in the right place. They're too high, and I think they're a little bit, this one here, I've drawn it a bit too close in, and I've drawn it a bit too high. I think I've placed it something like this, and so I need to move it. So no big deal, because I haven't gotten too far into the drawing. I haven't like rendered, you know, lots of detail. I think I'm only about 10 minutes in. I've just done a little bit of work on the eyes. So no big deal to rub it out, pull it down, redo the eyeballs and wrap the lids over it and all of this kind of stuff. All right, so here at this stage, I'm happy with my sketch, so I can move on to the painting part, which is really fun. Now, the painting part. Now this is going to be about trying to build up the values, the shapes of dark and the shapes of light. Because I'm using watercolor, I'm going to try and paint the lit areas, and then I'll try and paint the darker areas, because the dark can go on the light, but I can't put light over dark because it's transparent. With a more opaque material, like if I was using oil paint or digitally, I might be able to put light over dark, but with watercolor, I can't do that. So I'm building up my lit areas, and then I'm going to start to bring in my darks. Now, often what I would really recommend doing is going and putting in the overall shape of the dark. So let me just kind of outline that, like using these sort of filling in the overall shape of all of the dark, and then getting more specific about the planes. So if we look inside the dark areas, you know, we'll see that this plane is facing down, sort of under the eyebrow, and it's catching reflection of his shirt. And so there's a little bit of that white light coming up from the shirt. And I get the same on the other downward facing planes, on the underside of the nose, on the underside of the lips, on the underside over here. Everything that's facing the same way is probably going to be catching similar light, similar bounce light. And so I want to, you know, start to vary those things. But I don't want to vary those things too much. It's very common to then make this area like really light, because we notice that. It's still very dark, right? If I grab the lightest bit in here and I pull it over to the lit area, you can see it's really dark. So I don't want to overdo how, you know, it's slightly lighter. I just want to make it super dark, but just a little bit lighter than, you know, than this area, for example, which is relatively darker within the darks. So I want to separate the darks and the lights overall, and then I can just nudge some areas slightly lighter within that, and I can nudge some areas slightly darker within that. With the watercolor, I find that is hard to do, to put down like a big blanket value and then start pushing and pulling at the planes, because I can't, it's not opaque. So like here, I kind of want this plane, which is facing up and catching some light from the sky, I kind of want to cool that down, because it might be getting some of the blue of the sky. It's not going to be as warm, as kind of like hot and red or whatever, as some of these areas, like these little pockets, which are going to be basically kind of very deep brown, right? So if I catch, you know, some of the colors that are in the eye socket here, and I bring those out, you know, they're going to be kind of more saturated red relative to the stuff that's happening here, which is going to be more gray, because it's getting like counteracted by the blue of the sky. So in order to do that stuff with watercolor, I have to try and create those planes as I go, which I find really hard, while also creating the big shape of dark. So I want to vary these planes individually while also thinking about the big simple shape. And this is one of the challenges I find with doing a portrait in watercolor. And there are moments in here where it's all feeling just too broken up, too bitsy. You know, the dark shadow shape should be merged, it should be unified, but it feels like I've broken it up and I'm starting to panic. This is not working. But as I keep building the values and pushing them together, eventually it comes together and I go, oh, what a relief. Okay, so as I go, I want to think a little bit about my edges. So here I have soft edges in this transition. Not very soft, because it's a fairly sharp transition. So it's kind of like a firm edge, right? But here it's a cast shadow, and so the edge is very sharp. So hopefully you can see that this transition from light to dark is a little bit fuzzier than this, which is like more of a clean straight line. So I would like to bring that out. I don't think I do that terribly well, but I can always come back, and I have done this. I came back later and I got that edge and I put some water on it and softened it up a little bit, because I have too many sharp edges in here, and the contrast between the soft and the sharp edges is a really nice thing to bring out in a painting or a drawing. So this cast shadow is nice and sharp. Here it's going to be a little bit softer as the form shadow. The form turns away from the light. It's a slightly softer transition. Here we have a very soft transition from light to dark, and I've tried to bring that out. So with watercolor I can do stuff like try and paint wet into wet to create really soft edges, or I can put down an edge and then get some clean water on the brush and apply that to the edge to soften it and try and melt that edge away. Because, you know, it's really important to try to get the different edge types in there. Now, once I'd gotten to this stage, I wasn't sure what to do. So with the background, so I took a picture of it, I put it into the iPad, and I tried a few different options with the background. Once I was happy with that, I went to the next stage. I tried to tape off areas of his head to keep some of the edges clean, and then I applied some background around him. Now some of the background seeped in under the tape, and I was really happy about that, even though I didn't want that to happen, because it broke the edge. And it's kind of nice to sometimes break up these big sharp edges, or else they'll just be weird and unnatural and attract too much attention. So just breaking them up in a couple of different areas. So that's how I did that portrait painting. And so hopefully you saw that I grabbed a couple of ideas off Loomis. Most of it I've left behind. A couple of ideas off Reilly. Lots of it I haven't used. I just used what I saw in his face that would help me to draw what I saw in his face, and then build up the values in terms of the watercolor. What about with a sketch of this lady here? So for this sketch, same process. So an initial ball with the crosshairs to just show which direction her face is looking in, like this. Placing the eyeballs. I also try and place the bottom of the nose and the mouth and the jaw and chin. Once I've got that initial ball, I'll try and sculpt out the actual shape of her head. And then I'm looking for that ball shape in the muzzle, ball shape in the chin, sculpting out those cheeks. And then trying to build up the shapes of value. So I can see this whole eye socket is in the dark. It's going to be tempting for me to come in and try and like just draw the eye. But you know, what you don't need to do is eyes, nose, mouth drawing. You know, you'll often have tutorials which are like how to draw a beautiful eye, and they'll go on and on about, you know, the little flecks in this iris and all these details about the eye and so on. But if you'll notice when you look at the reference here, the actual shape that I see is this, right? And then within that, there's a very subtle, slight darkening, and the shape of that darkening looks like, because of the hair coming down, it looks like this, right? So the eye plus the eyebrow and the hair, the overall, let's say I'll put it in red, the overall shape of the dark is like this, and then the darker bit is in green, and it's only a little bit darker. And so what that means is that that's the shapes that I'm looking for when I'm doing that eye. First I put in the red, and then I'll slightly darken like this green. Now that is very different to, you know, all of this kind of stuff, you know? That's really, really different. So I want to really try to see the big shapes of value here. One thing I do here is I push the eye too far to the side. Same with the previous guy. I misplaced the eyes, and I'm going to move them around later. But so once I've put in my initial sculpt of the head with the ball and the muzzle shape and the eyeballs, I'll try and build up the big shapes of value, and then I'll cut into the shapes of value with smaller ideas like the actual, you know, smaller shapes, like here's the nostril shape, or here's the shadow on the upper lip. And I'm not thinking lips, I'm thinking shape of value. What is the shape of the dark? Well, the shape of the dark looks like this, right? And that is very different. Again, my brain is going to say, okay, lips, draw lips like this. But this is what I'm seeing, and that's what I want to draw. All right, so I keep going, and I get to here, and then I come back because I notice things are a little off in the eye, and I keep building it up. So it's maybe a 15 or so minute sketch. And that's how that works. Simple shapes, simple forms, and simple shapes. Sculpt the forms big to small, and put the values on big to small. So if you want to learn this process of drawing portrait, it's super fun because you can freehand it. You're not really copying, you're creating the face. You can stylize faces with this. You can change, like, okay, I want the eyes to be bigger, I want the cheeks to be wider, I want the ball of the chin to be small, and you can create very stylized characters with this same process. Or you can sketch people and capture their likeness if you like. You can do it all with this method. If you want to learn it, we have a portrait course in our study group. You also in the study group get all of our figure drawing courses, which are brilliant, even if I do say so myself, and you get one-to-one support and a really lovely community to learn with. So I'm super proud of what we've done in the study group. Check out the link below if you're interested. It's very, very affordable too, by the way. So check it out. Otherwise, I have another video up here about portraits. So go and check that out, and I'll see you in the next one.